My wife cheated on me with my brother, and because of that, my father rewrote his entire will in my name, since he was suffering from cancer. So, I'm Alex. I'm 34. And 3 days ago, I got a phone call from someone I haven't spoken to in almost a year, my father. There was no greeting, no "hey, how have you been?" Not even the usual snide jab he sometimes throws in for good measure. Just silence for a second. Then, "There's a family meeting tomorrow. Come by the house at 3. Your brother's flying in." My stomach dropped right there in the middle of the grocery store aisle where I was holding a six-pack of mineral water and trying to decide between pasta shapes. I clutched the phone tighter without realizing it. "Zach's coming," I asked, my voice low. Dad just said, "Yeah, don't be late," and hung up. That was it. No context. No information. Just dropped that bomb and left me standing there in a daze, trying not to start hyperventilating in front of the canned tomatoes. Let me explain why that call hit like a freight train. I haven't seen Zach in 4 years. 4 years, 3 months, and some change, if I'm being exact. The last time I laid eyes on him was the day after I found out he was sleeping with my wife, Melissa, my ex-wife now. Obviously, we'd been married 6 years when I found out. I was 30, Melissa was 28, and Zach had just turned 27. He was in town visiting, or at least that's what he said. I remember that weekend clearly, because I had to leave town for a work trip, a software convention in Dallas, and Melissa couldn't come. Zach stayed with us. I trusted both of them. They were close, always had been. Maybe too close, in hindsight. But I was the idiot who told him to make himself at home. And he sure as hell did. I came back 2 days early to surprise her. Flowers, a bottle of wine from that overpriced little shop she liked. I walked in on them in our living room. Not the bedroom, the damn living room. On our couch. The same couch we picked out together. She didn't even look surprised. I didn't throw punches. I wish I had. I just stood there like an idiot while Zach grabbed his clothes and ducked out. Melissa had the nerve to say, "We were going to tell you." That was the last conversation I had with her that wasn't through lawyers. I moved out 2 days later and filed. My brother never contacted me. Not even once. He moved to Chicago after that. I knew because my mother accidentally mentioned it during a guilt-laced voicemail. As for my dad, he called me once during the divorce, not to offer support, but to tell me I should keep things quiet so it doesn't make waves in the family. That was our whole dynamic in a nutshell. Clean surfaces. No mess. Sweep it all under the rug and smile for the neighbors. So yeah, when that man called me and said, "There's a family meeting," and then followed it with "Zach will be there," it was like being sucker punched through the phone. I stood there frozen, clutching my phone and trying not to feel like the floor was moving under my feet. I must have looked like I was having some kind of breakdown. A woman walked past me and gave me a side glance when I didn't respond to my cart slowly rolling away. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Just delete the whole conversation from my mind. Stay home. Drink. Pretend none of it was happening. But another part of me, the same one that's kept me semi-functional all these years, told me I had to go. Not for them. Not to play nice. But maybe just to see it with my own eyes. To see what kind of circus they were about to put on. Maybe I wanted to hear the excuse. Or maybe I wanted to see if anyone would acknowledge what they let happen. Maybe I just wanted to finally say everything I never said back then. So I told him, "I'll be there." And then I hung up and stood there staring at the pasta shelf like it held the answers to the universe. I didn't sleep much that night. I spent most of it sitting in my living room, staring at the old wedding photo I still hadn't thrown away. Not because I missed her, but because I hadn't decided what to do with it. Burning it felt dramatic. Keeping it felt pathetic. Throwing it away just felt empty. Like tossing out a receipt for a life I didn't get to finish. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know what kind of meeting this is. But I know one thing. I'm walking into that house with my eyes wide open this time. And if Zach tries to pretend we're brothers again, he better be ready for the look I've been saving for 4 years. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into my father's driveway, the same driveway I used to run down barefoot as a kid, chasing Zach with a water gun or lugging boxes in and out during college breaks. I sat in the car for a moment, fingers tightening on the steering wheel, staring up at the house that had once felt like the safest place in the world. Now, it looked like the setting of something that needed closure more than comfort. The porch light was on, even though it was still light out. That stupid yellow bulb had always flickered a bit, and somehow it still did, pulsing like a nervous heartbeat against the evening sky. I got out and walked slowly up the front path, the same path I had helped shovel when I was 16, grumbling under my breath while Zach joked about faking a back injury so he could stay inside with hot cocoa. I could almost hear our laughter echoing in the silence, but it felt hollow now. Each step on the porch felt heavier than the last. My foot hit the third board, the one that always squeaked. It still did. That sound used to mean home. Now it was a trigger. The smell hit me next, some mixture of old wood, dust, and my father's cologne lingering in the entryway. My hand hovered near the doorknob for a second too long, memories crowding in all at once. This was the same door I had carried Melissa through after our small wedding reception, grinning like an idiot while she laughed and called me ridiculous. I could still picture her leaning against that same doorframe one lazy Sunday morning, wearing one of my shirts, sipping coffee while Zach sat across the room, making some crack about how I'd married up. We were all pretending to be happy then. Maybe we even were, for a while. But now I stood there with a different heart entirely. Not love, not nostalgia, just this thick knot of resentment, suspicion, and something I didn't have a word for. Fear, maybe. Or dread. Like I was about to watch a movie I already hated but had to sit through anyway. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air felt still, like the house was holding its breath. The hallway looked the same. Same beige carpet. Same framed photos on the wall. There was one of me and Zach at Lake Huron when we were kids, grinning with towels wrapped around our shoulders. One of the whole family at a graduation, probably mine. I didn't bother looking too long. I could hear voices from the dining room. Low. Tense. I recognized Zach's laugh before I even saw him. He always had this smug, clipped way of laughing when he was trying to charm someone or hide that he'd said something cruel. I followed the sound, each step like marching towards something I hadn't rehearsed for. And there they were. My father, standing stiff with a drink in hand, as if this were a polite dinner party instead of whatever mess it was. My mother, perched on the edge of the armchair like she didn't quite want to be touching the house anymore. And Zach, standing near the window with that same easy posture, hands in his pockets like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong. The room fell quiet when they saw me. No greetings. No smiles. Just eyes on me. My father gave a nod, curt, like this was a business meeting and not some twisted family intervention. Zach's face flickered, just for a second, with something like guilt. But it passed too quickly to be real. I didn't say anything. I just stepped fully into the room and shut the door behind me. The echo of it sounded final, like the click of something locking into place. I was here now, and the people who had dismantled my life were standing right in front of me, waiting. Zach was already seated when I stepped fully into the dining room, sprawled out like he owned the place, wearing a designer suit in some overpriced shade of navy with the kind of cut that screams $1,000 tailoring to anyone who knows what to look for. His legs were crossed lazily, his arms slung over the back of the chair, and on his wrist, glinting beneath the soft overhead light, was a watch I recognized from ads and magazines. One of those luxury pieces that cost more than I made in 3 months when I was still trying to pick up the pieces after the divorce. He looked polished, well-fed, freshly shaved, like the last 4 years hadn't touched him at all. And sitting beside him, God, of course she was here, was Melissa. Her presence hit me like a second slap. She looked exactly the same and nothing like herself all at once. The same sharp cheekbones, the same perfectly shaped brows, hair pulled back into that effortless knot she used to do when we were late for brunch. But her expression was different. Colder. Smug. She didn't even flinch when she saw me. Just smiled, calm and collected, like this was some casual family dinner and not a reunion with the man whose life she'd helped wreck. Alex, she said smoothly, as if saying my name might strip it of meaning, like it didn't still ring through the worst moments of my memory. I didn't respond. My throat had locked up the second my eyes met hers. I looked over at Zach, whose lips curled into this ridiculous smirk, the kind he used to give people right before making some sarcastic remark. His eyes scanned me, top to bottom, and I could see the calculation in them. My jeans. My boots. The 5 o'clock shadow I hadn't bothered to trim. I wasn't dressed to impress. I hadn't come to perform. I'd come because I had to. Well, look who finally made it, Zach said, as if we were still teenagers and I'd just shown up late to a movie. His voice was the same, too. Smooth, confident, just a little too amused. Dad said you might bail. Melissa let out a soft laugh. Not even a nervous one. Just that little exhale she used to do when she was pretending something was cute but didn't find it funny at all. She looked right at me when she did it, and that laugh cut deeper than I expected, like she'd been practicing it for this moment. I clenched my jaw and tried to breathe through my nose, tried to focus on the details that wouldn't send me spiraling, the stitching on the chair cushion, the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, the uneven flicker of the chandelier above us. But the heat rising in my chest wouldn't be ignored. It wasn't just anger. It was humiliation. It was being surrounded by people who had taken me apart piece by piece and now sat in front of me like they were the victims. Nice jacket, Zach added, gesturing toward me with his glass. Didn't expect you to show up so casual. That laugh again. Melissa leaned back in her chair, crossing one leg over the other, showing off heels I'm sure I'd once paid for when we were still pretending to be in love. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, I wasn't sure what would come out. Words, maybe, or something louder. My hands were fists at my sides before I realized it. my nails digging into my palms, my heart pounding in my ears. I wanted to scream, to shout, to tell them both exactly what they'd done to me. How they dismantled not just a marriage, but the trust one had in people, the structure I'd built my adult life around. But I stayed silent. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. So I stood there, surrounded by the scent of whatever overpriced cologne Zach had decided to bathe in, and the faint trace of Melissa's perfume, the one she used to wear to bed, back when she still pretended to care, and I kept my mouth shut. Even when Zach laughed again. Even when Melissa tilted her head and asked, "You look tired, Alex. Everything okay?" I didn't answer. I just stared at them. The two people who had smiled their way through my destruction. And now they were doing it again. Only this time, I was watching from the other side of the room. Silent, boiling, unmoved, but very much alive. The silence in the room was thick enough to choke on. I was still standing, fists clenched, the heat rising in my ears, when my father suddenly stood up from his chair at the head of the table and placed a thick, white envelope down in front of him. It hit the wood with a muted thud that somehow cut through the tension like a gunshot. All our heads turned toward it instinctively, and for a moment, no one spoke. Then he said it. "This is my last will and testament." The words hung in the air, sharp and final, like a judge's gavel at the end of a trial. I blinked. Zach shifted slightly in his chair. Melissa's confident posture faltered just a little, the corner of her smile twitching downward before she caught herself. Neither of them said a word, but I saw it. The flicker of unease. The first crack in their composure since I walked through the door. My father sat back down slowly, folding his hands in front of him on the table like he was preparing for some business negotiation, his eyes scanning us one by one. He didn't speak right away. He let the silence stretch again, this time intentionally, letting it settle into the room like a fog no one could see through. "I'm dying," he finally said, his voice even, but thinner than I remembered. "Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. They've given me 3 months, maybe a little more if the treatment helps, but I'm not counting on it." The room didn't move. I didn't breathe. For all the anger I'd carried into that house, I hadn't expected this. It was the kind of sentence that makes everything else suddenly feel out of focus, like the lens just snapped too close. Melissa blinked hard. Her eyes darted toward my father's face, searching for some kind of explanation, maybe even a hint that he was exaggerating. But he wasn't. His expression was stone, controlled, but not cold. Zach let out a short breath and leaned back slightly, the arm on the back of the chair sliding off. His confidence didn't vanish, but it shrank. Just a little. Enough to notice. Enough to matter. "I didn't call you all here for some family reunion," my father continued, his gaze steady on the envelope as if it might open itself and do the talking for him. "I've had enough of watching this family rot in silence. I'm not going to be around to clean up after any of you. So everything that needs to be said, everything that needs to be settled, it starts now." No one moved. Even the air felt still, like the room itself was afraid to speak. I felt my pulse slow, not because I was calmer, but because something heavier had replaced the rage. Grief. Confusion. A reluctant sympathy that I didn't want to give him, but couldn't fully deny. He looked older than he had a year ago. Pale. Hollow around the eyes. His hands trembled slightly as he rested them on the table. And for the first time, I saw him not as the cold, pride-obsessed man who raised us, but just as a man. Dying. Fading. But the betrayal, the history, it was all still here too, thick in the air between us. And for once, Melissa and Zach had nothing clever to say. No fake smile. No smug joke. Just silence. And the envelope sat between us, quiet and weighty. A promise of something we weren't ready for. My father didn't open the envelope right away. He just stared at it for a few seconds like he was gathering strength, like the weight of what was inside might break him before the cancer did. Then he looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something I didn't expect. Regret. Not the usual disapproval. Not that stiff upper lip disappointment he wore so well. Just regret. Worn and raw. "There's something you need to know about your mother," he said, his voice quieter now, lower in a way that forced you to lean in, even if you didn't want to hear it. "Before she died, during those last 8 months, when the treatment stopped working and she was in and out of the hospital, I wasn't handling things very well. I couldn't keep up. I was still flying back and forth for work. I thought I was doing the right thing by keeping things stable financially, but I couldn't be there the way she needed. So I asked Zach for help. My heart started pounding again. Slowly, steadily. I didn't say anything. Just listened. I gave him access," my father went on. $5,000 a month. It was supposed to cover your mother's medical needs, private nursing, some of the palliative care not covered by insurance. It was all supposed to go to her. Every penny. He paused then, reaching into a folder that had been tucked under the will. A few pages clipped together, faint creases from how many times they'd been folded and unfolded. He slid them toward me across the table. Bank statements, credit card reports, hotel invoices, the kind of receipts that stack up in the background of a lifestyle you think no one will question. I didn't want to look. I already knew where this was going. But I looked anyway. There it was, in black and white. Transfers labeled Z, Mitchell, care assistance, followed by line items that had nothing to do with care. $742 at a luxury resort in Napa Valley. $1,120 at a high-end clothing boutique in Chicago. Restaurant bills over $300. Airline tickets. Spa treatments. This went on for 6 months before I caught it. My father said, his voice dull now, like the memory of it still stunned him. I was still sending money. And your mother? She was sitting in a basic care facility, waiting on medication that always showed up late, because I thought it was all being handled. I looked across the table at Zach. He wasn't smiling now. He wasn't leaning back or smirking or letting out one of those slick comments. He sat rigid, jaw tight, hands clasped together like he was trying to remember how to look human. Melissa wouldn't meet my eyes. My throat tightened, a kind of nausea crawling up from somewhere deep and cold. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. I just shook my head, not even sure if I was denying it or just trying to force something out that made sense. She died thinking I didn't care, my father said. She didn't say it, but I could feel it. She didn't know why things kept getting delayed, why her room got changed, why she lost her private nurse. I kept telling her I was doing everything I could, and she just smiled, like she didn't believe me, but didn't want to say it. The shame in his voice was so clear it made me sick. I thought Zach was taking care of her, he added. That's what he promised. I turned to Zach, and he finally looked at me. Not with guilt, not real guilt, but with that quiet, almost pitiful defensiveness that cowards wear when they've been caught too clean to deny it. Like he was already preparing a speech, some tired explanation full of holes and half apologies. I didn't say a word. I didn't trust myself to. My hands were shaking slightly now, not from fear, but from something older, deeper. The feeling of being robbed twice, once by betrayal, and once by the knowledge that while I was blaming myself for being distant, for not calling more, for not flying out sooner, my own brother was swiping a credit card at some beachfront hotel while our mother was dying alone. Melissa shifted in her seat. Her eyes flicked toward me, but she still didn't say anything. Maybe she knew there was no coming back from this. Or maybe she just didn't care enough to try. The room stayed silent for a long time. The pages sat there in front of me, black ink on white paper, spelling out everything they had taken. Not just money, time, dignity, trust. The final months of a woman who deserved better than this. And all I could do was sit there and hold the weight of it. My father didn't raise his voice. He didn't pound the table or demand answers. He just reached for a tablet sitting beside the stack of statements, unlocked it with a passcode, and tapped the screen. He turned it around slowly, deliberately, and placed it on the table so that the screen faced all of us. Then he pressed play. The footage was grainy but clear enough. A security camera feed. The date stamp in the corner hit me first, the day our mother died. For a moment, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then the image came into focus. A hotel lobby. Elegant. Marble floors. Tall vases with fresh orchids. The kind of place that offers cold towels and calls itself a residence instead of a hotel. And then they appeared. Zach and Melissa, walking in together. She was laughing, head tilted back slightly, in that way she used to when she wanted everyone to see how happy she was. He had his arm around her, wearing sunglasses indoors like some mid-level celebrity. A bellhop followed with 2 suitcases. They didn't look rushed. They didn't look worried. They looked like they were checking in for a weekend getaway. The video jumped forward. Now they were in the hotel bar, toasting glasses of champagne. Melissa's dress shimmered under the light, and Zach had shed his jacket, leaning close to whisper something that made her smile. Behind them, a muted television showed news headlines no one was watching. It was obscene. I could feel the blood drain from my face as I stared at them, not the people sitting across from me now, but those 2 glowing, comfortable versions of themselves caught on camera at the exact moment our mother was lying in a hospital bed, struggling to breathe. My father didn't say a word. He just let the footage play. A timestamp popped up on screen, 2:41 p.m. That was the same time the nurse had called him to say she'd gone. No one moved. Melissa's hand slowly slid off the table and dropped into her lap. Zach leaned forward like he wanted to stop the video, but he didn't dare. His face had changed completely. No more lazy grin. No trace of that easy confidence he always wore like cologne. Now his eyes were wide, unfocused, and for the first time since I walked into that house, I saw it. Fear. He looked at me like he didn't know what I was going to do. Like he expected me to come across the table or say something that would detonate the room. Melissa looked smaller now. Her back hunched slightly, shoulders tense. She reached for her glass of water, but didn't drink. Her hand was trembling. I watched them both. Two people who had spent years pretending they were in control, sitting in silence while the weight of what they'd done finally found its voice in a 15-inch screen and a time-stamped video. It didn't need music. It didn't need narration. It said everything. The champagne flutes clinked on screen again, as if to remind us. And in the silence of the dining room, that sound echoed louder than any words. The silence that followed the end of the video was unlike anything I'd ever felt. It wasn't just quiet. It was suffocating, as if the very walls of the room were holding their breath. Zach stared at the screen like it might change if he looked long enough. Melissa kept her eyes down, her mouth slightly open, as though trying to think of something to say, but realizing, too late, there was nothing left to say. My father leaned back in his chair, reached for the envelope again, and let out a slow breath through his nose, like he was exhaling the last bit of patience he'd ever offer. Then he spoke. "I've updated the will," he said, not looking at anyone in particular. "It's all in here. Signed, notarized, witnessed, everything done legally, so don't waste your time thinking you can challenge it." He paused and placed a single hand on top of the envelope, pressing it flat to the table. "All of it," he continued, his voice steady, like he was just confirming a delivery order. "The house, the savings, the investment accounts, the shares in the firm. Everything I own goes to Alex." Zach jerked upright like he'd been physically struck. His mouth opened, but for a second, no sound came out. When it finally did, it was a full-bodied eruption. "What?" he barked, his voice cracking with disbelief. "Are you kidding me? Him? After everything?" My father didn't flinch. He didn't even raise his voice. "Yes," he said calmly. "Everything." Zach's face turned a deep red. He pushed back from the table, half standing, fists clenched. "You can't be serious," he shouted. "You're really going to hand it all over to him like I don't exist? Like I haven't been part of this family my entire life? You stopped being part of this family the day you started lying to us," my father said, looking directly at him now. "The day you stole from your dying mother. The day you walked into your brother's home and destroyed it like it meant nothing. That's when you made your choice." Zach's voice was rising now, wild and uneven. "You think he's better than me? You think Alex is some saint? He left, remember? He disappeared. I stayed. I was here. You're rewarding him for walking away. You're confusing silence with absence," my father said coldly. "He walked away because you left him no choice. He stayed away because it hurt too much to come back. And you stayed so you could keep taking." I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just sat there, watching my brother unravel in real time, the anger spilling out of him in waves, his hands shaking, his voice cracking with disbelief and desperation. Melissa hadn't moved either. She looked frozen, her lips tight, like she already knew the fallout was coming and was trying to stay small enough to dodge the debris. Zach slammed his fist on the table, rattling the glassware. "This is insane," he snapped. "You're punishing me for something that happened years ago. We all made mistakes. You're not perfect either." "No," my father said quietly. "I'm not. But I'm dying. And I'm not going to let the last thing I do be handing over my life's work to someone who has done nothing but betray every person who ever trusted him." Zach looked like he was going to say something else, but nothing came out. He stood there, breathing hard, his chest heaving, fists still clenched at his sides. But it was over. Whatever he thought he could say to change it, it was already too late. My father turned the envelope slightly, facing it toward me, and let his hand fall away. "You betrayed your family," he said, his voice final, almost quiet now. "That's your choice." No one spoke after that. There was nothing left to say. The moment the words settled in the air, that everything was going to me and nothing to Zach, it was like watching a fire catch in a dry forest. Zach's breathing grew louder, more erratic, his eyes darting between me, my father, and the envelope like he still couldn't believe it was happening. Melissa sat frozen for a moment, her jaw tight, her hands clenched in her lap, until finally, she leaned forward and said, in a voice that was sharp enough to cut glass, "You can't do this." My father didn't even blink. He didn't need to. Zach finally found his voice again. "We'll challenge it," he snapped, trying to sound controlled but failing miserably. "You think this'll hold up? You think any court would let this stand? You're clearly not thinking straight. You're sick, and he's taking advantage of that." "Be careful," my father said, his tone suddenly cold in a way I hadn't heard before. Not angry, surgical. "Before you say another word, you should both take a look at this." He reached into the folder again and pulled out another document. This one thicker, bound with a clip, the cover sheet clearly labeled with the name of a private investigator. He slid it slowly across the table, same way he had with the first envelope, and tapped the top of it once. "I had someone look into it," he said. "Not just the credit card charges, not just the bank statements. A full audit. Every transaction, every false invoice you sent me. Fake charges from non-existent clinics. dates that didn't match up with appointment logs, hotels billed as recovery facilities, clothing stores listed as equipment suppliers. Zach's face went pale. Melissa tried to speak, but my father raised his hand slightly, and she stopped. "You want to sue?" he said. "Go ahead. But understand this. The moment you do, this file goes straight to the police. Financial fraud, wire fraud, misappropriation of medical funds. And before you think I'm bluffing, let me make something very clear. I have already met with a lawyer and a detective. If you so much as file a complaint against this will, the next piece of mail you'll get will be a subpoena." Zach's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He sat back slowly, eyes locked on the folder like it might bite him. Melissa's lips were tight now, pressed together with so much pressure her jaw trembled. She looked like she wanted to scream. Her hands curled into fists against her thighs, and for a moment I thought she might explode with the same venom-eyed scene when she walked out of our house years ago. But she didn't. She just sat there, stiff, silent, furious in a way that no longer had any power. The threat had landed. There was nothing left to bluff. And the fear that had started earlier in their eyes, when that video played, when the truth about the money surfaced, it was now complete. Total. Silent. A week passed after that meeting in my father's dining room, and I thought I might finally get a moment to breathe, to sit with everything that had happened without the weight of someone else's lies pressing on my chest. But then the fallout began, and it came faster than I expected. The first call came from an old friend of Zach's, someone we'd both known in college, someone who, for some reason, still thought I wanted to hear from him. "Hey man," he said, awkward and low. "I don't know if you've heard, but Zach's out. Terminated. Full sweep." I didn't say much in response, just nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Apparently, the firm had received an anonymous tip, though we both knew exactly who had given it. Not out of spite, not for revenge. Just facts. A simple packet of evidence, the same documentation my father had shown us at the table, addressed, and sent to the compliance department of the firm where Zach had somehow managed to fail upward for years. His employer didn't waste time. Within 2 days of receiving it, they cut him loose. No severance. No quiet exit. He was escorted out of the building with a box of personal belongings and a human resources rep at his side. It didn't stop there. Melissa, ever the strategist, tried to challenge the will. She filed through some boutique law firm downtown, the kind that handled estate disputes with too much polish and too little substance. But my father's legal team had seen it coming. The documents were airtight, the witnesses credible, and the supporting evidence irrefutable. Her challenge didn't even make it to court. The judge dismissed it outright as frivolous and legally unfounded. The way I heard it, she didn't even stay through the ruling. She left before the gavel hit the wood. After that, their perfect life, the one they had built together on a foundation of secrets and stolen money, started to collapse in full view. They lost the apartment first. That sleek high-rise unit in the middle of downtown, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows and overpriced furniture, gone within weeks. Melissa had no income of her own, not anymore, and Zach's name was quickly becoming poison in their circle. No one wanted to be tied to the guy who stole money from his dying mother and got caught on camera toasting champagne while she passed away alone in a hospital bed. Their friends began to vanish. Not all at once, but quietly, steadily. Brunch invites stopped coming. Group chats fell silent. Even the social media profiles that used to overflow with smiling photos and inspirational captions grew still, like someone had cut the power. They tried to move into a smaller place, but with Zach's credit tanking and Melissa's legal bills stacking up, they barely managed a one-bedroom in a neighborhood they used to joke about driving through with the windows up. Their Instagram accounts went private. Their phones, silent. And me? I watched from a distance. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I didn't say a word. Because some things don't need an audience. Some endings write themselves. About a month after everything had come crashing down around them, Melissa disappeared. No warning. No long post online. No dramatic send-off. She just vanished. I didn't even find out from Zach. We hadn't spoken since that day in our father's dining room. It was a friend of a friend who sent me a screenshot from the county court records. Her name, plain as day, listed as the petitioner in a divorce filing. Filed quietly, without contest. No kids. No assets to fight over. Nothing left to divide but silence. I didn't need the details to know how it ended. I could imagine it perfectly. The unraveling of their carefully constructed fantasy. The bills piling up. The whispered arguments that turned into shouting matches. The way two people who once laughed over stolen champagne now couldn't even look each other in the eye. Whatever love they told themselves they had, whatever lies they used to justify what they did to me, it hadn't been enough to survive what came after. Then, a week later, I got the message. It came late at night, just as I was getting ready to go to bed. Her name popped up on my phone, still saved in the contacts list from a time that felt like another life. For a split second, my chest tightened, instinctive, like my body still hadn't fully learned that she didn't have power here anymore. The message was short. Just 3 words. He ruined us. No punctuation. No hello. No explanation. Just that. I stared at it for a long time, letting the meaning settle in. Not just the words, but the fact that she had sent them at all. Maybe she thought I'd say something back. Maybe she wanted sympathy, or forgiveness, or one last moment of control. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have anything to say. I did. 100 things. All of them sharp, final, heavy with the weight of everything she'd taken. But none of it mattered anymore. Because I finally understood something I hadn't realized I'd been waiting for. I didn't know her anything. Not my time. Not my anger. Not even my words. So I let the message sit there, unopened after that first glance, and I powered off the phone. For the first time in years, I didn't feel heavy. I didn't feel haunted. I didn't feel like I was walking around in someone else's broken story. I felt free. It didn't take long after Melissa left for Zach's life to fully come apart. The house was the first to go. It had been Melissa's name on the lease, but when she filed for divorce and vanished, he couldn't cover it alone. The luxury SUV disappeared next, probably repossessed, though he tried to spin it like he'd downsized for peace of mind. In one of his last social media posts before everything went dark, the watch I'd seen on his wrist that day in my father's dining room? Gone. Sold or pawned. I didn't know, and I didn't care. His accounts started vanishing too. First LinkedIn, then Instagram. Even his old Twitter page, which he'd once used to post motivational nonsense about success and hustle, wiped clean. It was like he was trying to erase himself from the world he could no longer afford to belong to. The whispers came next. Mutual friends, the few who still floated around in both our orbits, started telling me stories. Zach showing up at parties uninvited, trying to pretend he was still someone important. Zach asking around for consulting gigs, offering vague services no one needed. Zach sitting alone at a bar downtown, talking too loudly, drinking too fast. And then, inevitably, Zach asking to borrow money. It came through a message, short and pathetic, with none of the arrogance he used to wear like a second skin. Hey man, I know things have been rough, but I could really use some help right now. Just a few hundred to get me through the next couple weeks. I'll pay you back. Promise. There was no sorry. No mention of what he'd done, what he'd taken, what he'd destroyed. Just that hollow, desperate reach. I read it once and closed it. Left it there unanswered. Not because I didn't have the money. I had more than enough. My father had made sure of that. And even without his help, I had rebuilt myself piece by piece, honestly and quietly. I ignored Zach because that was the only answer left. Because I had spent too many years carrying the damage he caused, and I wasn't going to carry his downfall too. Everything he'd built, the image, the comfort, the shallow success, had been a house of cards balanced on lies, on betrayal, on the belief that he'd never be caught. And now it had all collapsed around him. Debt, isolation, humiliation. He was finally standing in the wreckage he had created, and I wasn't going to help him out of it. That was his to live with. My father died on a cold, quiet Tuesday morning, just under 3 months after that day at the house. It happened in his sleep, in the hospice room he had chosen himself, the blinds open so he could see the sky when he woke. Though, in the end, he never did. The nurse said it was peaceful. No struggle. Just a steady slowing until everything stopped. He'd told me it was coming soon. He'd known. And still, it felt like the ground shifted underneath me when I got the call. The funeral was small. He'd requested that. No open casket. No long speeches. No pity. Just close family and a few people from his old firm. A simple service, a modest reception. Everything else had already been arranged, down to the suit he wanted to be buried in and the music that would play as they lowered the casket. No surprises. That had always been his way. Zach showed up late. I saw him standing near the back, in a wrinkled black shirt and shoes that didn't match. He kept his head down, his hands buried in the pockets of a threadbare coat, and he didn't speak to anyone. He didn't approach the casket. He didn't look at me. Just stood by a tree, watching from a distance like a man who'd wandered into someone else's goodbye. I didn't acknowledge him. Not during the service. Not during the walk to the burial site. Not even as I stood with the others while the final words were spoken over my father's grave. I didn't feel anger in that moment, or grief, even. Just a strange kind of stillness, like something had been completed, folded away, and put where it belonged. After the last of the guests had left, I was standing by the car, getting ready to drive home, when I saw Zach walking toward me. His steps were slow, unsure, like he was trying to talk himself out of it even as he moved closer. He stopped a few feet away and looked at the ground. "Alex," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I looked at him. His face was thinner than I remembered. The skin beneath his eyes was sunken and bruised with sleeplessness. His hands fidgeted with the sleeves of his coat, and there was nothing left of the brother I used to know, not even the lie of confidence he had clung to for so long. But I didn't hesitate. "You said it all when you betrayed me," I said, my voice calm. "Even. Goodbye." I didn't wait for him to respond. I didn't care what words he might try to find, what half-apology or fragile excuse he might have rehearsed on the way there. I turned, opened the car door, and got in without looking back. In the rearview mirror, I saw him still standing there as I pulled away. Small, silent, alone. And that was the last time I saw him. A few weeks have passed since the funeral, and I've started settling into the house. It's strange, in a way I didn't expect. Not haunted, not heavy, but quiet. The kind of quiet that feels earned. There's no tension hiding in the walls anymore. No ghosts of conversations that never happened. No bitter memories waiting to ambush me around a corner. Just space. Light. Room to breathe. I've been working out of the study now, turning it into something of a home office. The desk still smells faintly of my father's cologne, and sometimes when I sit there late at night, I can almost imagine him just outside the door, pacing with a cup of black coffee and a notepad full of figures. I don't try to imitate him, but I found myself appreciating how meticulous he was, how he left things ready, prepared, even in the end. My own business is growing. With the resources he left me and the time I finally have, I've been able to scale up the way I always wanted to but never could. It's not about proving anything to anyone anymore. It's about building something that's mine. Something honest. Something that doesn't come at someone else's expense. I don't hear from Zach. I don't expect to. Melissa's name hasn't crossed my screen since that last message. Their chapter is closed. What they built was a house of smoke, and it's gone now. I didn't take anything from them. They just finally had to face the cost of what they'd done. People sometimes ask me how it feels to have ended up with everything. The house, the inheritance, the truth. And I tell them the same thing every time. I didn't get it out of revenge. I got it because it was right. Justice isn't always loud. It doesn't always look like triumph. Sometimes it just looks like silence where there used to be chaos. Peace where there used to be weight. And I don't look back. That part of my life is over. And now, for the first time in years, I get to decide what comes next. Thanks for sticking with me through all of this. I know it was a lot, but I'd love to know what you think. Would you have handled it the same way? Would you have responded to Zach or Melissa, given them one last chance? Or was silence the right answer? Let me know how you see it.